the morning sunrise. In Lions Gate, 'neath the tall fir trees, on your face feel the ocean breeze. Feel the magic that's in the air. In Lions Gate, the fair.
Welcome to another Lion's Den. I am Baron Kinneret. Tonight, we are exploring with one of my favorite people in this game we play, the world of staying cool, Roman garb, Roman style. Morweena is a champion archer, a weaver, an expert seamstress, a pelican, and a member of the Grey Goose Shaft. She has taught myself personally in archery to a great degree. So, key gear for hot camping events. Roman patrons knew how to stay cool because they kind of had to, and layer up for the kinds of temperature swings you might vaguely remember can happen at outdoor events. And this year is no exception. Dressing Roman is some of the most iconic, simple, elegant, and flattering period choices out there. Mistress Morweena is one of the most active artisans here in the Barony of Lions Gate and is always busy creating, weaving, sewing, and teaching. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us tonight. Please take it away, Morweena. You're
distracted by a little cat out the window. Sorry, just keeping an eye on my little teenage boy who's staring at me through the door, too dumb to walk around to the other door. Hi, glad to see you all here. I just tried to share a file, but it doesn't look like I'm allowed to share a file because I'm not a host. I don't know if one of the
Kevin can probably get you set up.
either that or I can put it up. And now I can drop my file because I do have a presentation that I've done. And the presentation that I'm going to share with you is quite a bit more in depth than I want to cover this evening because it was for a 2-hour class. So I'm going to just sort of breeze over a bunch of stuff, but I thought it would be handy if you had a copy of these PDFs. So let's just see if it will let me add a file. No, it still only wants them from Google Drive, which I don't use. Well, that's disappointing. Let's see if it lets me drag. Nope. Okay, so I'm going to have to post them later in the LionsGate list or something because it's not letting me add the documents to the chat or upload them because they're not loaded on a Google Drive. They're like on my desktop. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you this presentation that I made. Let's see if I remember how to do this. Share screen. Go. Do you see Introduction to Roman Clothing?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So as our wonderful Baron said, one of the nice things about Roman clothing is it is extremely comfortable in all kinds of weather. It is super easy to make. Actually, it's just nothing but a bunch of rectangles. And it is very flattering if you make it right. If you make it wrong, it's kind of boxy, but it's really easy to learn how to do it right. And it's just got to do with the fabrics you use. The other thing I like about it, now we've all been sort of on our own for the last 18 months, and maybe you've shrunk, maybe you've grown, maybe your garb doesn't fit. This will always fit. It doesn't matter where you are, your personal size, it will always fit you. There's really no way that the Roman that you made 2 years ago won't fit you today. So
is that the same for armor?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Is that the same for armor?
Not so much the armor. You know what? I can't hear very well, so I'm going to put my headset in. Just 1 second here. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do this because it makes it harder to get up and grab the garments that are behind me.
Okay, how's that? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to start with this presentation, but I am going to breeze through some of it because some of it is just, how should we say, too much. So this is Introduction to Roman Clothing, the garb that always fits. I just want to start off with some really basic notes that this is only a brief introduction, and I'm focusing mainly on the late Republic and early Empire. So a very specific set of what we think of as classic Roman dress, classic Roman clothing. This document does not contain any original research. It's all things I've learned and adapted from others. And I also want to state right at the beginning, Rome was a very genderized society. We are not. So when I use the term men and women, I'm referring to the archetypes that were used at the time. Dress as thou wilt. And I also want to mention that Rome was very class structured. They had very strict sumptuary laws. The SCA were a lot more flexible, but we can also use the Roman sumptuary laws to our own advantage to indicate rank. Rome was very much about you were who sorry, I've had a very long day. I just got here from a barbecue. You were who you, someone wants to be admitted. I don't have a mouse. It was very important so they could tell, thanks, so they could look across the field and know what rank you were. So the clothing was very much indicated rank. You are who you were. There we go. And just about rank, so you'll hear things saying the revered for consul level. So there's different ranks in Roman society. There's the consul, emperor, and their family. So think your king and queen. There's senators and patricians, which is upper level. So that could be your prince and princess or the peers of the realm. The equestrians, even though that's the term where knight comes from, is actually more roughly equivalent to our grant level awards. Then there's the common people with the plebeians. The non-freeborn citizens are the proles, and the slaves are the servi. And each different level dressed in a slightly different fashion. And you should tell who they were purely based on what they look like. Okay, the other thing, Roman clothes are actually very body modest. We think about drapey peplos gowns that are open up the side. That's actually Grecian. Greeks were very pro-body. They exercised and did Olympic Games in the nude. They wore their garments unsewn up the side. The Romans were actually very, very body modest. And they had ideas of what was dressed and undressed and what was appropriate, inappropriate behavior. So the main difference between Greek and Roman clothing, and I'm sorry if I'm getting too deep in this already, is that it's actually quite modest, despite being very clingy and drapey. Some garments, colors, and fibers had ritual importance. Wool was considered alive and it had magic qualities. So it was used in garments of special significance. So the Vestal Virgins wore wool, and a particular Roman garment called a stola was always made of wool because it was considered magical. So as I said before, you were what you wore. It was important in Romans to dress the rank and to be able to determine age and rank and class at a glance across the field, which is very very helpful. I don't know why I'm so nervous tonight. Very helpful in an SCA context if you can look across the field and know exactly the rank of the person you're talking to. And this will come up a lot. Unmarried adults were very, very rare. So if we say matron or married woman, if you're an adult female, you probably were married. You may or may not have lived with your spouse, but you probably were in a married status. So we're going to cover what men wore, what women wore, how children dress differently from adults, and then how to make them and how to do accessories, hair, and makeup, because that's what takes a costume to being clothing, is by adding the accessories. You see, I've got, this is plastic, but I've got my hair done up and I've got jewelry on that's appropriate for a Roman woman. And it just kind of helps make your garment more than just clothing. So we're going to start with men, and I am going to score to correct this fairly quickly. Is there something in the chat? I can't access it when I'm presenting, but I see there's messages in the chat. I don't know if our host can see that.
I can, Marion Kiva here. I can monitor the chat and let you know if there's a question or hold them to the end. What would you prefer?
Questions in the middle is great.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll take that on.
Okay, perfect. So clothing makes the man, and you are what you wore. The most basic garment, and this is actually for men or women, is called the tunica. It's a loose fitting garment that goes to, for the men, it goes to about the knee and is pulled over the belt. It often has no separate sleeves. It's just a rectangle. And what gives it any shape is wearing a belt. There's also a type of sleeve tunica, which is just a classic tea tunic. And I mean, just like that tea tunic we all started with at our very first event. And we're like, oh my God, I need garb. And you literally drew a T and sewed it. that is a type of Roman tunic. That's exactly what it was, just a straight T. The neck is just a horizontal slit or an oval. It's not, when you look at a nice Norse or Norman tunic where it's got the nice round with the slash, never like that. The Romans just did a simple oval or a slit. The younger you wore shorter tunics, or if you were poor, wealthy men wore long ones to mid-calf, and it was very rarely worn out unbelted outside the home, because just the act of not wearing a belt was considered being undressed. And here's a couple of images. I just want to show you, like this first gentleman here in the red is wearing a classic sort of military tunica, and it is literally just a rectangle. You can see it's just a rectangle of cloth. It's got the two clavi down the front, which is the stripes. The gentleman down the bottom corner is wearing a very similarly cut garment where it's just a rectangle, and you see the shaping is done by he has a belt on. And then up in the top corner, we have this lovely picture of Patrick Stewart with hair. How about that? Patrick Stewart with hair. That's from I, Claudius, which is a really, really excellent BBC drama from the 70s. I love it. The costuming is actually quite good. All the cuts are correct. The shapes are correct. The colors are correct. Well, colors are kind of correct. The fabrics, however, are very 70s upholstery based, but the cuts are all perfect. And the accessories are also very good. So you can also see behind Patrick Stewart there, Patrick Stewart is wearing the T tunic shape. So he's got the sleeves, and there's a young boy behind him wearing just the straight basic tunica. So white or natural were used for daily clothes for the upper classes. The poor couldn't get that nice bleach color, but they would wear as bright a white as they could afford. But bleaching linen is not entirely easy. Linen actually is a tow color when it's natural. So the more poor you were, the more dingy colored your clothes were. The legions always wore a white dress tunica, which would look really sharp with their brass plates, but they wore red in battle because that's just practical, right? You don't want to show that you're bleeding, so they would wear red. Then you do see Roman clothing in bright colors. They had special tunics that they wore to go out to dinner. They were called synthesis, and they were dyed bright colors. So that'd be great for court, right? Think of going to court or banquet. That's when you would wear your bright colored, your best clothes. The two stripes, the horizontal stripes you see on so much of men's clothing are called clavi. They were actually woven right into the cloth, but they're easy enough to do for our purposes with bias tape or ribbon or some other trim. The width and color is what donated your rank. The wider the clavi, the more rank, the more rank you had. So they used those stripes, which in the empire went from shoulder all the way to the hem. Later on, in the period that Licinius does, they go to the middle of the chest. I won't cover the different widths here, but you can see in the document that I'm sharing, and that I will get to you somehow, that the wider the clavi, the higher you rank. The emperor wearing gold and purple, and senators wearing like a 3-inch stripe. So let's say you're a fighter, it's the Roman persona, and you are wearing just your regular narrow clavi, but then you win crown or you win coronet, and you want to instantly indicate your increase of rank. You could just add wider clavi to your same tunic, and suddenly you indicated a higher rank, just that simply. Sometimes men would have bands of color at the hem and at the neck, but not a lot of decoration on the clothes. They like very loose drapey fabrics, so very fine tropical wool, which is really hard to find these days, but a nice tropical wool or a drapey linen, not a linen that's too stiff, would be great. They would wear multiple layers of lighter weaves rather than one layer of stiff, heavy fabric, and said linen and wool. Richer classes may have worn silk. We have found some fragments of diamond twill, and they were actually found in Roman Britain, way up north near the border. It was a diamond twill, which gave it a nice texture, but it was tone on tone, so it was just strict red. And fabrics were usually a single color. This is about undergarments. And really the undergarments are just another tunica, slightly narrower, a little shorter. Gentlemen sometimes would wear drawstring shorts or knee-length trousers. This was considered very déclassé in Rome itself. But Roman senators weren't riding horses. They weren't invading Britain where it's very cold. So these trousers were adapted by the barbarians as a practical aspect for the Roman infantry. They also wore a type of leg wrap called putti, which is not like a Norse leg wrap. It's not like the windigas that winds around your leg. It's actually a bag that goes on your leg and you tie with strings, almost like a gaiter. There's contradictory evidence on whether they were loincloths, but exposing yourself is considered very bad manners. So they probably wore something. And over top of all that, they wore the toga or the pallium, which is the classic draped garments. So it was sort of required for public dress for men to wear a toga because it indicated their rank. Children wore a very specific type of toga until they came of age. And the reason for that is so that you could look across the marketplace and see a child and know that he's not a slave and not for the stealing because he belongs to a citizen. So therefore, the children were protected by their clothing by being dressed in a particular fashion. The toga is usually white. If you're in mourning, it could be a darker color. If you're the emperor, you get to wear purple because you're special. I'm not going to go over these different types of toga. They're in the document. It's really just the difference on the types of toga that are on this list is the color and the size of the border on them. And I will discuss later the size of the toga and show you some illustrations on how to drape it. There's also another type of draped garment called a pallium, which is more like the Grecian wrap. So when you think about Sophocles or the Greek philosophers being wrapped in a piece of cloth, it's about half the length of a formal toga, and it was stolen from the Greeks. And it can match your tunica, and it was really nice, fashionable attire that they might wear out to dinner, and that they would then take off to lounge on the lounge wearing their tunica. Now I'm just going to quickly go over women's clothing. It's all about layers. This wonderful illustration that I stole from the internet is a Roman statue that has been painted to show the different layers. You know, the first statue, it's very hard to see what she's wearing. But when you paint the layers, you can see that this woman is wearing a tunica, which is the red or sort of pink color. She's wearing a stola, which is the blue garment that's on the top. And she's wearing a green palla, which is the wrapped garment. The young boy on her side is wearing a type of toga, or he's wearing the pallium. And he's got a very common necklace that young boys wear called a bula, which is the big medallion there. They wanted to protect children, so they used magical amulets to protect them. This is just a silly quote talking about women wearing undergarments. Whenever you get up from your hair, I have noticed it again and again. Your unfortunate tunics sodomize you, lesbia. Just indicating that they probably didn't wear loincloths or anything underneath their tunica. So all women would wear the tunica, which is the undergarment. It's kind of actually, that's what I'm wearing right here. This is a tunica. And they would wear the palla when they went outside, which is the wrap that goes over them. A married woman wore the stola over their tunica. The stola was never worn on its own, and each garment could be a different color. And it's a little confusing because they're very similar in shape, but not quite. You can see in this painted statue that the stola, which is the pink in this case, looks a little bit like a tank top, where it's got the straps on the top that come down. This garment, by the way, which you can't really see, is more like the blue one. I just have the sides undone. It actually has longer sleeves. Hold my headset out. There's a ton of different names for the different types of tunica. The main important bit is that the tunica mulibiris, I don't know how to pronounce it, to be honest with you, is the style worn only by women that has that wonderful gaps down the sleeves that you think of when you think of beautiful Roman women's clothing with the gap sleeve tunica. It's only worn by women. The other names just talk about whether it has a seam on the top or it's folded over. It's really not that important. I have some images here that shows you some different clothing. So the woman sitting on the chair with the cup is wearing a tunica mirabilis, which is the white undergarment. And she has the sort of pale green stola on top. The young girl to her side, and I know it's a girl because she is wearing the lunar emblem, which is the necklace she's wearing with the crescent moon on it. Young girls wore that until they came of age. And the woman at her feet playing the lyre, they were both wearing the tunica mirabilis. The lady on the top carrying the basket with the apple, she's wearing a blue stola, a white tunica, and a pink palla. And the picture of that weird looking woman down there in the bronze with the big white animal, that's what I'm wearing right now. And it's actually a tunica mirabilis. I just happen to have the sides undone. If I had an extra fastener, you would see that it looks more like the gap sleeved tunica. I just happen to have it undone, which is perfectly acceptable in hot weather. The tunica mirabilis is just 2 rectangles fastened at the shoulders at various points. Undoing 1 or more points will allow the sleeves to fall open, making it look like a tank top. And that is, like I said, that is what I'm wearing now. You can really see me very well. Where, like I said, if this was done up, you would see that it actually has sort of sleeves. Sometimes it was decorated on the top edge. There's some debate on that. It's always a solid color, and it reaches to the ground and is belted up under the bust. The Roman ideal for women was actually small bust, big hips, very much like the Renaissance figure. They wanted the wide, healthy hips and small chest. That was what they considered to be attractive. So a lot of the garments are designed to make you look like that, which with our modern aesthetic is a little bit of a struggle to think that's attractive. So here's an image of myself wearing a stola and a tunica mirabella. And I can tell you in these images, first of all, I'm wearing the wrong kind of belt, but this is a society of creative anachronism, right? And I'm not alone. And my belt is too low. So I actually should have it up higher just under the bust. Like this woman here who is wearing a stola. The stola, again, was worn by married women. It's actually kind of matronly, and it starts going out of fashion as the Roman period, as the empire progresses. It becomes less and less fashionable because you can see the way this woman is wearing it. It's actually quite a bulky, wide garment. Like, look at all that extra layering over her hips. She's actually wearing 2 belts, one under her bust and one over her hips. And then she has it billowed out over that second belt. And it's to create the silhouette that they found attractive. When you look at Roman statuary of the various empresses, they continued to wear the stola after it falls out of fashion because they were trying to construct an image of themselves as being perfect housewives, being perfect matrons. So they would continue to wear this garment even after it fell out of fashion. As I mentioned earlier, it was always made of wool, never linen, and that was for ritual reasons because wool, part of the house, women spun, etc. It had a mystical significance to it. And the last garment women would wear is the palla, which is the draped outer garment. It's only worn by respectable women. It was solid. It could have a contrasting border. It's in the early Republic, it's worn over the head, which looks very elegant, like this woman here and the statue. And as time goes on, you see it worn less and less. It starts getting a little bit cumbersome. And they start wearing a sort of a draped version of it, just goes over one shoulder and tucks up over one arm. These garments were very voluminous and they took a lot of effort to wear. Like when we get to the size of the toga, it was like 9-12 yards. It was humongous. It's a lot of fabric. And they started finding ways to just make it a little bit more comfortable. Women always wore undertunics underneath their tunica. This is good for a number of reasons. One, and anyone who sews will tell you this, it preserves your garment if you have something to absorb the body oils and sweat, etc. Also, like I said, Romans were very body conscious. They would, if they're wearing a tight sheer wool, you want to wear some linen underneath it to hide it. And this works for us as well, because you can make Roman garments out of something as inexpensive as turban cotton, which is very sheer. So you need to have something underneath, otherwise you're probably going to get arrested. There's lots of discussion about this particular image of a woman wearing bra band and little panties, and some leather pants have actually been found in a Roman bath in London. There's some discussion that they may have been rentals for going in the baths, which seems kind of weird by our modern standards that you would rent underwear to go to the bath, but they definitely wore breastbands to support, but also to minimize, because again, the attractive level, what was considered attractive is small bust. I haven't gotten into making any of these because it seems really uncomfortable, and I don't think it's practical for my body shape. Children of citizens wore a particular type of toga. It had a very narrow purple band along the edge, and the whole indication of it was to mark them as children of citizens, so they're hands off. Rome was kind of a wild place. People could be snatched off the streets and sold into slavery and all kinds of crazy things. But if you were marked as a child of a citizen, you were safe. Young boys wore something called the bulla, which we saw in an earlier image, which is the big round gold amulet with bull horns on it. And it was supposed to protect them. It also marked them as underage until they came of age, at which point they would put on their manly gown, which is a quote from my Claudius, and would remove the bulla. Girls would wear the lunar pendant I mentioned, and unmarried girls wore the peplo style, which I will show images of in a bit. So how do you put this all together? I know I'm talking really fast. I should say, does anybody have any questions so far now that I've rambled for 26 minutes straight? Nope. Okay. Well, now I'm going to talk about sewing them and putting them together, which is actually very, very easy. This is another image from I, Claudius. Again, I just love this. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend it. It's lots of fun. There's no redeeming female characters in it at all, which is unfortunate. But other than that, it's quite a good show. So here you have the Emperor, the wonderful Brian Blessed, wearing some really, really bad old man makeup. And he is wearing a tea tunic and he's wearing a toga in the royal purple because he is the Emperor. And then we have Empress Livia sitting beside him, and she is wearing a brown tunica, a purple stola. And then she also has this strange wrap on over top. I'm not sure what that is, but it's Livia and she can do as she wishes. She was the first Empress of Rome. So the basic men's undergarment, or actually any of these garments, they are all just rectangles. And the unsleeved rectangular tunic looks exactly like this gentleman standing there with his arms out. If it says a tunica recta, it just means it has a shoulder seam. So you'd either make it with a shoulder seam, or, you know, I'm gesturing with my hands like you can see me, even though I'm sharing my screen and you can't see me. So this style
see you on the side of the screen. So
oh, okay, perfect. The recta just means it has a shoulder seam, or it was folded over, and it was just really, really basic construction. And it just really just means you just take a length of fabric, and if it's a recta, it's sewn, so it's folded this way, and you sew it along the top and the side. And if it is the one with just a fold on the shoulder, it's literally just making it like that. It's super, super easy. So here's a bit of a diagram on how they're made. I'm not sure how that looks with the sidebar. So the eclases is unstitched at the shoulder and the recta is folded. The main thing is you do need to make sure you sew it up the sides. Do not leave it open. That's considered very inappropriate. And the neck, you see this gentleman here, he's got just a wide oval for his neck, which by modern standards seems a bit uncomfortable. Like, I know when t-shirts are too tight, it kind of drives me nuts. But they just use a wide oval and they just tuck the seam in. There's no fancy facing, nothing. Really simple construction. What makes this gentleman look put together, because opposed where he looked on the first one, where he's just wearing a square, is once he's got that belt on, now he's got a little bit of shape. So there's a little bit of math here. You want to use, and again, I can put this somewhere where you guys can get it, which explains the math involved, sort of how much extra you need for ease and how much extra you need to blouse over your belt, because you can see he's got it pulled up over his belt, and that's what gives it that nice look. For your underlayers, you want to make your piece a little bit smaller. So he should be wearing, under this garment, he should be wearing a smaller, narrower, plain little smock underneath it. And it's just made exactly the same way, just a little bit narrower. The seams are not understrained, so you can use loose stitches if you want to work them by hand. I've actually got some garments behind me where I have sewn them by hand because it's just super, super easy. And I'm just going to show you, I'm going to take off my headset for a second. I'm just going to grab these garments behind me. This rectangular tunic is literally just a tube. So this is my under tunic, just sticking to the turban cotton. Here's the problem with working with turban cotton, it sticks. It is literally just a tube of fabric sewn all the way up the sides, all the way up. And this one happens to be pinned at the shoulders with a nice pair of brooches I got from Master Eric. But it is literally just a tube of fabric, and that's all there is to it. It is that simple. And so this little thing just tells you that you want to make the tunic loose, so wider than your widest measurement, and you want to make it long. So you want, if you're let's say you're 5'6", you want it to reach to the ground, you would want about 60 inches of fabric lengthwise. We need 1.5 times that in order to be able to blouse it over your belt to make it look nice and drapey. The tunica capticum is a classic tea tunic, but with an oval or slash neck. Man, I am really rambling tonight. It's a little less full than the wide one because you're using the width of the fabric and you're just going to cut a T. And this is also from my Claudius. I picked a lot of images from my Claudius because they're easy to find. And this particular character is wearing the tea tunic style with some clavi down the front. And that is the drawing of it right there. It doesn't have the nice gores under the arms. You know, when you make a Norse tunic, you put those square gores under the arm, which allow you to have good movement. So this garment has to be loose, or you're going to tear it apart when you go to move your arms, or it'll just feel like you're being stabbed under the arms. That's why it has to be loose, which is why it will always fit you. And also, because it's loose, you can get a nice little bit of breeze under your clothing, which is very important. As I said, this is cut slightly less full than the sleeveless styles because you're going to take the same piece of fabric, which they would weave to width, by the way. And I'm just going to use my piece of paper here. And you're just going to use, so this will be your final width. This is your sleeves. And you're just going to cut in like that to make your T. I don't have any measurements to give you for how much space from the top of the shoulder to the bottom of the arm, but it does need to be loose and generous. So if you saw it in this image, you can see his sleeves are pretty full, and that's what stops it from tearing under the arm. For women, you could have a narrow band along the top edge. I have a couple garments behind me where I've got some decoration. And this one here, which is another tunica, I've actually put a tablet woven band along the top edge, which of course is inside out because of course it is. There we go. I've just got a nice little band of tablet weaving on the top because, you know, me and my tablet weaving, I'm always weaving. So I always have little scraps of tablet weaving kicking around. This is actually made out of turban cotton, which is super, super comfortable to wear. But as I mentioned, it's very sheer. So you need to make sure that you're wearing something underneath it. Men's tunics could have the contrasting bands, which I mentioned earlier. This garment, the tunica mirabilis, is probably the one that people think of the most when they think of women's Roman clothing. It is sewn up all the way up the sides, maybe with a little gap at the top to put your arms through. So this is a tunica mirabilis, and it is just a tube sewn up mostly up the side. I left the top, a little bit on the top. And then it has a couple of fasteners along the top that create the shape. Now, this woman here in the yellow in my image has the sides undone like this one. But so much easier to do in person than to do over Zoom. This is another tunica mirabilis, and you see it's got the multiple, as it falls off the hanger, multiple gathering points, giving it that nice gap sleeve look. The points could either be sewn together, they could be pinned, or they could be gathered into little rosettes. And one of the documents I will find a way to share with you talk about these little rosettes that they would do to gather them, which make them look a little gathered and nice. So basically to make them, you cut 2 lengths of fabric. You want to make them 1.5 times your desired length. So again, if you're 5'6", you want your dress to be approximately 60 inches or 5 feet long. You need 1.5 times that for each the front and the back, because you want to be able to billow it up over your sleeves. Now, it is, like I said, just a tube, but what also makes it look really nice is this dip in the front. So there's a couple ways to do it, and the easiest way I find is just to make the back piece narrower than the front piece. So if you're making one like my white one here, I'll take my stola off of it. This is a very stiff linen, so it's actually not the best example, but it's what I did. So I've used the full width of the fabric for the front, so the full 60 inches, but the back, I cut 8 inches off. And it's what gives, hold it by its neck, a little bit of drape in the front, which stops it from strangling you and also creates this nice sort of V look. And it's just as simple, you just take the full width of your fabric, cut off 8 inches off of the panel that's going to be your back, sew it up the sides, and pin it along the top. And there's your nice Roman garment, and then you belt it.
So if you're doing that for a man, you do the same, or
For the men, you just cut an oval. You don't even do that gaping. You notice that the men, it looks a little bit like they're being throttled.
a little bit?
Yeah, and it's a very wide panel. So they just took the fabric and sewed it up and either left it wide open. There's none of this attractive draping. It's only the women's garments that have this sort of gaping in the front. The men's sit fairly tight up on the collarbone. You have to make sure that the men's necklines are fairly wide, sort of collarbone to collarbone, like all the way out here, so that it doesn't throttle you. It actually, to my eyes, looks a little uncomfortable.
I would agree.
So again, with the women's, the easiest way to get it to drape nicely is, like I said, make the back narrower than the front, and then just start pinning it on yourself until you get a drape that you like. You want to make sure it's not too tight under the arms, that you're not showing too much cleavage, but just enough to create a nice long line that you're happy with, and then pin it or sew it, and that's it. I've got a couple images here of a very sassy looking woman here in red. She's wearing a nice bright pink tunica mirabilis. She's got little buttons that she used to gather the leg, the top. And she is wearing a stola over the top. The stola has straps. That's how you can tell the difference between the two pieces. And then I've got a couple images here showing and then these wonderful painted statues showing the side. And you can see, and this is where I made a mistake with mine. You know, we learn as we do, right? So you make something and you go, oh, I should have done it like that. So you see how on the statue, there's like there's the button that holds it in, and then there's an opening, and then it looks slightly gathered where the points are. I didn't do that. Consequently, when I wear it, it looks nice, but it doesn't look quite as nice. If I had gathered it ever so slightly where my joins are, then I would get more of that sort of puckered look that is so typical. And also, like I said, this particular linen that I use is a little bit stiff. It doesn't sit quite right. The drapier the fabric, the better. The lower image, it looks like she's actually wearing two tunica mirabilis. She's wearing a white one and then a blue one over top with really deep gathers on it. It's very attractive, but she must have been very wealthy, whoever she was. And then there's your classic peplos, which you think is sort of Grecian. It's may have been worn by young girls. The advantage of this style is the girl got taller, because children, they tend to grow. You would just fold over less and less and less of her garment. It's put together exactly the same way. It's a tube. The very top is not sewn. You fold it over and you pin it. And as you leave this sort of peplum hanging in the front. And as the girl grew taller, you would just fold less and less of it back till finally it was just pinned at the shoulder. For pins, you can get these wonderful, you can get these wonderful pins. And because I've had a really crazy day, I cannot remember what they're called, and I apologize. It's like the medieval safety pin. Oops, where's my camera? There we go. And you can use these to pin them shut. You could use safety pins if you hide them underneath, because let's say you're going to that event that's happening in Sigurd on the first weekend of August, and you're like, my children have outgrown all their clothes. You can just sew them a tube and pin them on the shoulders, and off they go, and you're good to go. So yeah, the other garment that women wore is the stola. The style did change a little bit over time, but you can really tell the difference between the stola and the tunica because it is basically a tank top. Here's the first one I ever did. And it is very much like the early stola. It is a tube sewn all the way up. The back is narrower than the front. So you can see when I hold it out, there's a little bit of draping in the front. And the shoulders are actually little straps that hold it in place. And that's the stola that goes up. Mine happens to be silk noil, which is not entirely appropriate, but it's a little easier to find than really nice tropical wool. The only time you see the stola worn on its own in proper Rome was during the Republic, so before the Empire. But you see very similar styles to this in all kinds of other cultures, because it is just a tube. It's a simple style of sewing. What makes it Roman is the fineness of the fabrics and the accessories and all the mystical aspects that went to their clothing styles. This is another style of making the stola that I have not done myself. and it's not documentable by any means that I understand, but it makes a very attractive front drape. So in this case, what she's just done, this woman who's made it, is she's put her seams on the front and the back rather than on the sides. So she's made them the same width and she just doesn't sew it all the way up. And that's what gives it the nice V. Again, this is a women's only style. Men, men get to be strangled by their clothes, and I don't really know why. So use linen, fine wool, nothing stiff. While men wanted white, women loved color. Just stay away from dark purple. Dark purple was reserved for the emperor and his family. Only he got to wear dark purple. The hems were just simple turned hems. So for the men's necks, just tuck it under, like in my little sketch, my little photograph there. Nothing fancy. So the most important dark garment for men, if they weren't legionnaires, is the toga. And you can see from this image, this is a lot of fabric. So your classic toga was draped as per this image. So it would start over the left shoulder, go around the back, under your arm, and put over the side. As they got longer and longer, the drapes got more and more ridiculous, and you needed a slave to help you dress. You pretty much could not do that by yourself. It had a curved edge. So if you look in these images, you can see the edge is curved and the top is flat. It was 6 to 9 yards of fabric in the early empire, and it should be as wide as you are tall. This is something that's very tricky to do nowadays without seaming, because most fabric is no more than 5 feet wide. And, Decimus, for example, is 6 feet tall. So we would need 6 feet with the fabric. It was never pinned. It was always held. It's a very impractical garment. And later, as it went on, it actually got to be 12 yards, and it got to be really ridiculous. The other drape garment is the palla or the pallium. It's actually the same thing. For women, it's a palla. For gentlemen, it's a pallium. And it is 3 to 4 meters long, 150 centimeters wide, and just hangs down on one side, goes under the arm, and drops over your arm. Very easy to wear, but it's a nice finish to your look. It makes you look more put together to have them on. And here's a couple of illustrations showing how to wear them. I said it earlier in the empire, the women would wear it over their head because when they went out, they needed to cover their hair. And as time went on, they got less modest and would just stop wearing it over the head because, again, it's not practical. It's just a simple rectangle. It can be decorated on one side. For men, it can match the tunica because it's a fashion garment rather than the symbolic toga that they wear to the Senate. Women can wear it in contrasting colors, and it can be made of wool or linen. Now, I've gone through super, super fast. Does anybody have any questions on how to make these things? I know I'm just gonna over it. Or is everybody just really enjoying Sunday night and they're just chill?
I think we're all enraptured. Keep going.
Okay. Well, what's up next? You need to finish your look. Hair, makeup, accessories. And again, I have a picture of Empress Livia from I, Claudius, because one of the nice things about this show is they went into great detail with the hairstyles and the jewelry and the makeup. And this is the wonderful Siân Phillips, who's an actress I love pretty much everything I've seen her in. And you see Empress Livia has her diadem. She has her wonderful necklace, and she's got her beautiful little curls. She's got her elaborately done hair. Men, well, the hairstyles for men are kind of boring. It's your classic Spock. Short, brushed forward, and clean shaven. Only barbarians had beards. Sorry, Kenrick. So you think your classic Spock?
Yeah,
or your
I don't think you're
haircut,
that sorry.
right? That is the classic Romulan. There's a reason Romulans in Star Trek had that hair, right? It's your classic Roman hair. Women wore your hair up, not down. Girls wore their hair down. Women wore their hair up. They used braids, but they wanted it curl. They wanted elaborate curls and braids to hold it up. And they actually would have slaves, especially trained to do their hair. As the empire went on, the hairstyles got absolutely insane. Like we're talking wall of curls in the front, and I have some images. The diadem, which we can see Livia is wearing here, is debated. It's usually only seen, and that's the sort of Roman brass thing on the top of the head. It is seen in a lot of statuary, but usually of women who have been deified. So it may be, did they wear them, or is it to indicate that this woman has been made a goddess? because that was something that they often did with emperors and their spouses when they passed on, was they made them into deities. For the SCA, however, because we do wear circlets to indicate rank, it is appropriate. I do know a few peers who are Roman who do wear them because they look fantastic, and it's a great way to indicate rank. Did somebody say something there? Okay, I can't really hear if someone's talking there. So here I have a couple images. The first showing a deified woman wearing the diadem on the top of her head. She has her elaborately styled hair, kind of similar to what I've got on, but I did this very, very quickly. I just tucked mine into a plastic hairband. Totally admit it. It's a cheap Gibson girl headband that I chucked on. She's got a little bit of curls on the side, and you see she's actually wearing earrings. The image on the top there shows a woman getting her hair done by her slave, and you can see that she's got it tied back in a bun, and she's got the front nicely curled, and then she's got the braids in the front, and her hair is slightly undone because she's having an argument with her mother. Again, it's from I Claudius. The statue on the bottom with that wall of curls, look, I mean, that's some of the most ridiculous hair, right? That is the later Flavian period. So as you go further on in the empire, the hair gets crazier and crazier and crazier until you get this sort of wall of curls, which could have been a wig, because how would you get that to stay that? Like, it's just nuts. And jewelry, Roman jewelry. So ladies, you get to wear jewelry, you get to wear earrings. So the images here I have of necklaces, the first one, the blue and white one, is a copy of a found artifact. So they would have sort of the rosary style, where you've got the chain linking the beads and the dangling earrings, and they did pierce their ears. And sometimes with a pendant in the front. The other one is also an image from a found item, but the glass beads and precious gems tied together with chain. The lower item is the bulla, which is the boy's medallion, the big gold medallion. Roman women also wore makeup. Roman is great for the vain, right? You get to wear these comfy clothes because they actually are very comfortable. If you're wearing soft drapey fabrics, they're very flattering, and you get to wear makeup. You want a pale face. You want the brows to be lined and darkened with kohl, same with the eyes. Eyeshadow, very bold eyeshadow actually, and blush on the apple of the cheek. So they didn't emphasize the cheekbone. They went for the healthy glow on the front of the cheeks, and pale lips. They didn't actually wear lipstick. They did other things with their face though. It's not a natural look by any means. It's actually very, very bold. And we know some of this from finding portraits, they're funeral portraits, and they're wearing very heavily kohled eyes, very bright colors on their eyelids. It's not really a natural look. And you can see this woman has her hair all done up as well. And that's what I got. Any questions? And when I get this document to you, I do have some links on there for some excellent resources on how to make Roman clothing, and a YouTube video showing a woman having her hair and makeup done by a makeup artist trying to emulate the Roman style. And I'm going to pause sharing. I'm going to stop sharing and close this document. I do have something else I can show you. This is not my document. Let me just go back to sharing. This is, come on. Can you, no, you're still seeing me. No, I have to hit the share button again. There we go. This is not my document. This is from someone else's class that I found online, and she says it's appropriate to use her images as long as you credit her. And you can see her name there down the bottom. I can share this document to you so you can get her original research. She did these cute little drawings of women, and I just find these drawings to be really helpful because they show the layers. So this image here is Lady of the Republic. She's wearing the tunica marbella, which is the slightly pale orange underdress. She's wearing a red stola and a blue palla. Lady of the early empire, she's wearing the same layers, but now she has a stola with the straps. And I just love this next image. I don't know why, because it looks like Arcos Ailing de Sez. Does it not? Like, I've sent it to her and she's like, why do you have a drawing of me dressed in later Roman clothing? I don't understand. So this is a little bit later. This is in the mid to late empire where the women start wearing the tea style tunic rather than the draped one. So this is also a possibility if you want to use light drapey fabric and make a tea tunic. And I mentioned that the palla changed from a 4-meter garment to a small wrap, and that's what we have in this image right there. And I can find a way to share this document as well, because again, I found it super, super helpful. I can post it to the LionsGate forum in the files section, since I can't seem to put it in the chat. And now I really am done, I swear. And I will stop sharing again. There.
So
And
what, like, you're saying that Gladiator was wrong?
yes, you know, one of the things I hate watching any Roman movie is how terrible most of the costumes are. I know we all hate that.
Yeah, but didn't Russell Crowe have a beard? Like a...
He did, but he was a Spaniard. But yes, no, a Roman general would not have had a beard.
All right. It's
So
okay,
wouldn't Russell Crowe look
I'm
weird
Norman,
without a
not
beard?
Roman, so it all works for me.
Mm-hmm. You
One
are a
of the-
barbarian.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed was that the men's costumes were not actually that bad. It's the women's that just made me absolutely bonkers because they were so bad.
Usually when you see these things, they wind up using saris and stuff for the fabric because it's got a nice drape and it's pretty. And you could use a sari to make Roman clothing. A lot of people do. It looks nice. Just realize the ones with the embroidered elements on them, they're not really correct, but they're super pretty. So it's what you want. Do you want to make it correct, or do you want to make it really nice the way you like it?
And if it's polyester, it won't breathe.
Yes, yes. The what I'm wearing right now is silk. One of the advantages having worked in fabric stores for years and years and years is I had this lovely sand wash silk sitting in my closet. I had no idea what to do with it. And remember the July coronation that was moved because of the fires? It was very warm, and I'm like, okay, I need to wear something comfortable. Hot day. I'm gonna make Roman, and I put it on and went, oh, I really like this. I don't know if it's the hair or my bone structure, but I think it looks really good. So I've been wearing it ever since.
So Morweena, we do have a question.
Okay.
The question is, and apologies if you've already covered it, what color of eyeshadow is common?
You know, I don't have that written down. It just says, my notes just say darkened with coal. But if you follow the link that's in the notes, I'm going to find a way to post for you. It shows sort of a smoky color. So I think, you know, like grays, sort of a smoky eye, but I don't,
Morweena,
I can see,
if you
I
can
can
send
see,
files to me now, I can upload them to the chat. I can put them on Google Drive.
I couldn't hear what you said, Kevin.
If you want to send me the files, I can put them on Google Drive for the chat.
Okay, perfect. I will do that. Just give me a minute. So if I go quiet, it's because I'm doing stuff.
Certainly. And it sounds like we have some questions, so I'm going to leave the recording going.
I can see lapis being ground up and used for eye pigment as well by those who could afford it. I know there's been a lot of study on that. I just don't have that information for me.
So the next question is that coal as in CACOAL or coal as in KOHL? And I don't know what the
KOHL.
difference is.
Yeah.
HOL.
Okay.
So I'm just giving Kevin some documents.
So I have a question.
Shoot.
What kind of loom would they have been woven on?
Oh, you know, it was a vertical loom, but not warp weighted. And they were woven to size. And it's another thing I don't have on tap, but I have been told that it's like the Saxon vertical loom, but not the warp weighted style. So it was a tube. It was weaving a tube. I really can't.
I have, if anybody wants, I have, I believe in my documentation, some pictures of a picture of a Roman loom.
Excellent. Like I've read about them, but I just don't have, I'm a really introverted person who had a very socially busy weekend. So my brain is just completely fried. So I apologize for not being as prepared as I would have been, but it was something I looked at because apparently they wove them to width of what they wanted. You know, I looked into that. Desktop, you silly person. find this document that I want. Got the document open, but can I find it to send to Kevin? No.
A question for you. In terms of the subuculo, would that be, they be wearing that underneath their tunica mulieris?
Yes, definitely underneath. There we go. That's the document I'm looking for. I can look back at that other document in a second. I just, like I'm multitasking.
But it wouldn't necessarily show.
No, exactly. I mean, mine is showing a little bit because I am wearing I'm just wearing a smock, but no, it typically would not show. It was underwear and it was considered déclassé. You didn't show your undergarments or your nether regions. They're very picky about that.
I had a question. You said there was a lot of symbology in the clothing. And so if somebody wanted to make an outfit, is there any colors they should avoid? Any colors that are like advertising
Purple.
something? I don't know.
Purple is the emperor.
Mm,
I don't have any documentation on this, but I've heard that some shades of red denoted a scarlet woman.
Okay.
But women, prostitutes wore the toga and not a tunica. I should have got into that because you could see what, and also sort of a honey yellow color was reserved for the Vestal Virgins.
Okay.
Sort of a, like the color you would get from Weld.
Okay. Like a lemony color?
Yeah, I think it had a little bit more, a little tad more orange to it, but there was a very particular shade of, like, because Vestal is like the fires, like the goddess of the hearth. So think like a flame yellow, and the Vestal Virgins wore that color. This all stuff is in my brain that I haven't written down. Terrible, terrible thing. And like I said, purple was reserved for the emperor and his family because cochineal and Kermes and expensive.
Before you had said dark purple, is it just dark purple or is it all purples for the emperor?
I believe it's dark, rich purples in particular, but the lighter purples would be done from exhaust baths from the same insect, so probably not accessible. I mean, I can't speak to that 100%, but I would assume if purple was considered a royal color, the upper classes might have wanted to emulate it, but they couldn't necessarily get their hands on that dye stuff because it was reserved for his family. But I would need to, I can't prove that information. I
And
have a
that's
purple
actually a
stola,
more-
but I shouldn't.
So-
Isn't the Roman purple a little more pinky,
It's actually
like
quite
a
rich.
magenta rather than the amethyst?
From what I mean, I could be wrong on this. I'm totally willing to get it. I believe the color that Augustus is wearing in that image where he was sitting in the royal box was approximately the color. But I didn't specifically research that color for today.
So just so everyone knows, there's links to the handout are now in the chat. So if you want to pull up the chat and follow those Google Drive links, there's now 3 links up. There they are.
Yeah. And thank you, Kevin, for doing that, because I was hoping that I could put them in ahead of time so people could follow along. I had something else I was going to say and I can't remember what it was. It was relevant. So like I did say, you can use really light fabrics, which is nice. So like I said, I've got one made out of turban cotton. It's so comfortable in a hot summer day. So comfortable. And you know, for making the clavy on the men's tunics, for example, like you can just use bias tape, you can use ribbon, you can use trim. It's really easy to put on. You could paint it. Really easy to do. And all of a sudden it's really warm in here. I have all my fans and air conditioning off so it wouldn't make noise behind me. And now I'm dying.
Okay, let's see. Does anyone have any more questions?
I will say I am totally willing to, if we're at an event and you want to ask and I can pick up my garment and show you what I mean, because in person it's always easier to understand. By all means, just ask me and I will pull it out and talk your ear off. And
Molly, if that's how you pronounce it, Molly from Kaid has her hand up. She has a question.
I just want to make sure I have this straight. You have a tunica that's very wide, an under tunica that's a little narrower, but still very wide. And then you have a stola, which is really pretty narrow.
actually, if you look
6
at
to 12 inches bigger than my hips.
it's actually the stola could be very wide. Like that one image I had in the handouts, showing the woman in the red stola that's
Yes.
bolted over her hips.
The double belted.
Yes, and it is huge. It is massive over her hips.
Okay.
And what I found for myself, if I'm wearing my very wide stola, not very stola, very wide tunica, and I want to put my stola on top of it, I'm actually wearing a belt under the stola. So I have the tunica belted,
Right.
and then I put the stola on top of it, and it just makes all the layers manageable. I don't know if that's accurate, but I can't see how you could blouse in the stola over your belt and not pull your tunica up if you didn't have a second belt on underneath. Because I tried it one way, and it was just all these layers, and it was crazy because I had the subculum, the sort of tube undergarment. Then I had the tunica marbella over top of it, and then the stola, and I couldn't control the volume until I put a belt on the tunica, and then another belt on top of the stola. And the
That
belt
makes
should,
very good sense.
yeah, the belt shouldn't be this cheap elastic metal thing I'm wearing. It's actually just a length of trim or rope, a nice cord. Really, really simple stuff.
If you put the first belt holding the tunica against your body and then a second belt over it holding the overfold, then the next garment over it sits even better.
Yes, exactly. I found that out in a simple way by putting my clothes on and went, I can't get this to look good. Because it's adjusting the folds around the belt that really makes it look like something other than a sack. Because really, you just made a sack. It's just rectangle. It's just a sack. It's the belting and tucking it and pulling it up that makes it look attractive. That's all I have, unless someone has any other questions.
Well, I think we should probably wrap it up there. I think that you covered a lot, and I know that your handout will be sort of extensive because I know you. And so people probably want a chance to review. I don't know if you feel comfortable. What's the best way people can reach you? Is it on Facebook? Is it by email? What's your sort of preferred? If people want to follow up.
I prefer email, and I'm just going to put my email address in the chat.
Okay.